大家晚上好，很荣幸为大家做这个演讲。在这样一个全球都遭遇新冠病毒的特殊时刻，我衷心的希望大家都能平安无事，采取一切安全措施来保护自己。
Hello, my name is Jawad Sarwana. I am a mediator and an advocate and an arbitrator based in Karachi, Pakistan. My presentation today is for the session on latest development of international commercial mediation. And I will speak specifically on the digital transformation in international commercial mediation. So let's begin now. My presentation will focus on the last 11 months in which we have been living in coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic and a projection of the next year and future beyond the coronavirus pandemic, which includes life after the vaccine. So let's begin. Some of the discussion points that we will talk about are the COVID-19 acceleration, the latest digital developments in global mediation, which have been brought about during the last 11 months because of coronavirus, and how the vaccine will play its part in the future of mediation, especially commercial mediation. And then finally, we will talk about mediation digital developments besides online dispute resolution. And we will draw conclusions both for the short run and the long run of what these developments, the latest developments in commercial mediation, can guide us about what will happen in the future post the vaccine as well. So let's begin now. When I think of what's happening today, I am reminded of the times when I would have to call out a cab by saying, "Taxi!" It isn't the case now that I do that because life has been replaced by Didi. Today, when I require a taxi cab, I don't hail for a taxi cab. I simply check my phone and I use Didi, which is like an Uber application for calling a taxi cab. The reason for this is because when Didi and Uber came at a time, the world was ready for it. It seems like the developments that we are facing in international commercial mediation are also at a time when we need it, the place is right, and both as a mediator and mediator practitioner, and for those who are involved in dispute and need resolution, they want their case to be solved. It seems the online dispute resolution platforms have arrived at the right time. What is also happening now is a lot of players have to adopt in order to continue their business practice, in order to continue their trade as lawyers, as mediators, and international arbitrators. They have had to adjust. And the adjustment has had to be made across the board. So even though, generally speaking, arbitrators are supposed to be quite old and mediators are also quite senior in their age, what everyone has to do is look at broadband, camera, mic, speaker, lights. Mediation has almost become like a movie production because of these elements. So this is one of the developments that is happening in international commercial mediation, is that a mediator is not simply as a process manager involved in the content of the mediation, but has to be much more hands-on in the process as an editor of how he's going to communicate with this device. Another thing that's happened is that now that I, as an international mediator, don't have to fly to Dubai, which took 3 days, flying in, day of mediation, and the next day, say half a day, because if the mediation went the following day, I had to make an adjustment. So being out of my city, which is Karachi, for 3 days, I can now mediate, no problem. So I can prepare as a mediator, I can meet the counsel and the parties on the other side at Guangdong in the morning. And then in the evening, I can mediate as a mediator a dispute involving a North American client because they're waking up at 9:30 and afternoon is still not that late in Hong Kong or Macau. So actually the number of mediations has not gone down. I'm actually more accessible. This is another development in international commercial mediation that a lot of practitioners now have to meet. Finally, there's another element which is also taking place. There is a great divide. The divide is that people who are witnessing increasing number of COVID cases are proportionately also involved in looking at alternatives to face-to-face mediation. But there are some countries like my country, Pakistan, it has had a much more stable meeting with coronavirus. But India has had a very high rate of COVID-19 cases. So in India, there's a lot more preparation and a lot more being done by dispute resolution practitioners to meet the challenge by going digital, by going online. But in Pakistan, because the COVID-19 has not been so serious, lawyers and judges are still maintaining the same face-to-face environment and there is no acceleration. What will happen in the long run is that in the next few years, Pakistan practitioners will be left behind, whereas in the West, in Europe, and China, there may be more familiarity with these tools. So there will be a divide. So that is something that one can see that's unfolding in the commercial mediation landscape at the moment. So what is that's happening? Well, one of the things is the rise of ODR platforms. We already see that Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx are being used by mediators in their day-to-day commercial practice. But these are not bespoke, which means they're not specialized. For example, what is also available are these four, well, these are the more four familiar mediation platforms that I am familiar with that are also being used. The beauty of these four are that unlike Zoom, nobody will come to your rescue or help. But on Legal Air, Modron, Crack ODR, and Resolve Dispute Online, if there is a problem for the mediator, he or she can immediately call these representatives to help because it's more hands-on. So I think what is happening is that these mediation platforms are getting more users. And I think in future, because if there is going to be a hybrid approach, you will see that these kind of special softwares will be more successful. What else? Well, one of the other things that's happening in the mediation world is that insurance company, for example, this particular one, Geico in the US, has decided it's going to resolve all its disputes through mediation. And this might be a beginning of a trend. Another thing is workplace mediation. Now that offices are closed, how do you address a dispute or a conflict or a difficult conversation? Well, you have to do it online. There's no other way. And so commercial mediations in the workspace are also increasing as well. Again, one of the other things that's come up are crypto and smart contracts, and these ones already have embedded ODR clauses. This means I don't have to scratch my head when I see a dispute. Oh my goodness, who's going to do this? Everything is closed. Well, guess what? Most of these contracts have ODR clauses that are ODR specific and lay down the protocol and the methodology of addressing an ODR dispute, which is helpful when I am looking at dispute resolution, right? Okay, let's go next. But the mediation space doesn't necessarily have to be, all great. There are some challenges. What are those challenges? Well, the reason why you go into a commercial mediation is because you want the mediator, you're expecting the mediator, you're hoping from the mediator that he or she will help you resolve the dispute by creating rapport between the parties so there is communication. In the digital space, that's quite a challenge. And so this is a difficulty that one has to face as a mediator. How do you bring the parties to communicate when they're so far apart, maybe even different time zones? So that's one aspect. Another aspect that commercial mediation is facing is security of conversation. You know, the idea of recording the meeting. Who is present in the room? Is there someone there who doesn't belong there? And what does that have to do with confidentiality? So those are other aspects which mediation has to meet. And these are challenges. Finally, and this is something that's also happening across the world, is a lot of arbitral and mediation bodies, institutions are now having ODR rules that are specific for an online mediation, because their old traditional mediation rules don't quite work in the digital area. So they are now bringing in these new rules, and we're probably going to see a continuation of this. What else? Well, this is what has happened so far, but maybe the next thing that will happen to control this idea of confidentiality, you might well have a camera in the middle with a 360-degree angle that will make sure everyone in the room is recorded. And there may be separate 2 or 3 cameras so that the idea of confidentiality can be retained and maintained both in international commercial mediation and quite possibly arbitration as well. There might be another aspect of immersive mediation where you will have software with people wearing goggles, and they will be in their zone, right? And nobody else in the room will be there except those who are wearing the goggles. And this kind of virtual reality mediation might also be the future in the next few years. In particular, if coronavirus and the vaccine fails, that might clearly happen. If not, then there might be a more hybrid approach. Finally, I think mediator Autobots that are used by businesses so they know if there is a problem, there's a series of questions and they resolve it. I think that's going to be much and more commonplace in mediation. And it might actually even threaten the human interaction and the human face of mediation, because mediator Autobots might be the to-go area when looking at customer satisfaction or customer disputes. Well, what do we have to learn? In the short run, I think the future is hybrid. It's going to be both something that's face-to-face and something that is digital, because it saves costs. So what might be continuing to remain digital? Well, emailing documents, emailing files, electronic filings, uploading, I think are here to stay. They were here around, but now they are firmly in place. So even after coronavirus, COVID-19, this element of digitalization is not going to completely disappear. But I think what is much more of a challenge is this idea of how cost effective this is going to be. Because remember, the problem with cross-border commercial arbitration is the costs. And what's that? Well, the problem here is that the average cost of an arbitration is 10 to 25% of the claim. If it's going to be so expensive to resolve disputes, even in the online, that the costs of 10 to 25% are not going to decrease, then clearly mediation becomes a much more cost-efficient option. And while arbitrators might resist this and the practitioners will resist it because it doesn't make good business sense for them, if the companies say, hey, we are cash strapped and we're not going to go for this expensive arbitration because it costs so much, we're going to look at other options, then we might well see the rise of mediations. And it isn't necessarily the case that mediations will be inexpensive, because it's always about the value. So if the value is that the mediator online is bringing value and there is greater volume, then mediation will also be more successful in that sense. So in fact, these are my thoughts on the future of international commercial mediation and how digital aspects will add to it. I hope you have enjoyed the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much to the organizers for having me here. It has been a pleasure. Thank you, and bye-bye.